And we're back. Zanhorn here, and today I'm making an Elder Scrolls Online healing guide. And the reason I'm making this is because I like to heal a little differently than most of the other cookie cutter builds out there. There's a lot of skills that are quote unquote mandatory that I just don't think are mandatory, and so I wanted to share my build. Then you can sort of judge for yourself, see if it's for you. Part 2 of the video will go over some gameplay video and show you how I implement all my strategies and my skills and that sort of thing. But was just really quickly wanted to go over my experience in the game, and I've been playing Elder Scrolls Online since it launched, and started off playing a Templar tank and didn't like it all that much, and I switched over to healing, and now I've been doing it for quite some time. I have played all 4 classes, but the Templar is very much my speed. I really enjoy the class abilities and the way it synergizes and melee and range and all that stuff, and we're going to go over some videos later about leveling and that sort of thing. But for now, let's get on to the skills. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to go over my skills and my skill bars, and I'm going to use ESOhead.com's skill calculator in order just to make sure everything is easily seen on the screen and you can go over all the abilities instead of fumbling through all the menus in the game. So hopefully this will be a little easier to see. Before I get started on the skills though, I just want to let everybody know, so it should be very clear that there's various ways to do healing in this game, and pretty much various ways to do everything in this game, and so this is just the way I do it. Other people do it differently, maybe min maxed, I don't know. This is my way. I've been healing for a long time and the way I have the most fun. So that's all that important to me. I've been able to do all the content, so not had a problem with that at all. Also wanted to say that in this game, for me personally, I really like healing. That's obviously the #1 goal, but when I'm not healing, I also like to add utility and add DPS to the run as well. It just makes things go faster. So those are the 3 main roles that I'm going to be concentrating on when I'm building my loadout to be able to provide to the group. And so that's a lot of the main reasons why I make these decisions. So I'm going to assume that you have some basic working knowledge of some of the more basic skills in the game, and I'm not going to go over every little thing for time's sake, but let's just get started here. I use dual Restoration Staff, which is very common. Some people use dual wield on their second bar for skill extra bonuses and chance and that sort of thing, but I use heavy attacks for restoration of magicka quite often, and having those abilities on the Restoration Staff on either bar is just nice to be able to do that whenever, regardless of where I'm at. So my healing bar is pretty standard here. I use healing springs, which is very common. You can lay down 3 of these at a time. They stack and do quite a bit of healing, so that's sort of my go-to heal most of the time because it's cheap and it's quite effective. Of course, the second one is very standard Breath of Life. I have that on both of my bars because that is my emergency heal that I use quite a bit, and regardless of which bar I'm on, I want to be able to pop that in a situation where it's required and not have to fumble between bar to be able to pop that. Here's the next ability that I use. I love this ability, but it's not very commonly used. It's Ward Ally. It allows me to put a bubble on myself 100% of the time and whoever has the lowest health points in the rest of the group. So if the tank is taking damage and he has got low health points, I can pop that and puts a complete and utter damage shield on both of us that absorbs both magical damage and physical damage. So I like that a lot because I want to be able to protect people that may be standing in the fire or unavoidable damage and that sort of thing, and it just does a really good job of adding almost extra hit points to your party, and it lasts pretty good duration too. 6 seconds is a decent amount of time. Then I switch over to more offense on my first bar here. I have Purifying Light, which adds a debuff or a buff or whatever you want to call it to the mob that stacks up damage and then pops and then adds a little bit of a heal. I like to throw this on. It's instant cast. Throw this on the boss or throw this on a big mob or something like that, and it goes it just adds a little passive DPS, and I can do other things while it's loading up and then explodes onto more damage. And then of course I have Radiant Oppression, which I use in the execute phase when no one's taking any damage. It just adds a little bit more DPS to the group and burns down the boss a little faster. I also use, for my ultimate here, Solar Disturbance. I use this more defensively, able to throw that down and help take a little bit more defensive pressure off of the rest of the group. And yeah, so I use that as my defensive ultimate. My second bar is, here's where I started to go a little bit off the beaten path, so to speak. I use Channel Focus a lot. I throw it down, gives me an additional 8 seconds of, or it gives me increased armor and spell resistance while I'm in the circle, and then when I leave the circle for 8 seconds, it still gives me that defensive bonus. So I'm able to boost my defense quite a bit, and also boost my magicka recovery, which is always helpful, so I'm not running out of magicka. I love that ability as kind of like a standard buff, as I'll throw down when there's not much going on in combat. And I couple that with my second sort of buff that I throw down, which is Purifying Ritual. I throw this down all the time. It not only strengthens the rest of my heals through some of the passives, but it also cleanses any debuffs that I might have on me. So I'm throwing this down so often that debuffs usually don't stick on me too long, and I'm able to kind of maintain my health. My fifth ability here is Repentance. This is something that is just one of my favorite skills in the game. I pop this after every fight, regardless whether it's mobs, AoE trash, or if it's just his boss or whatever. It's just my standard habit to pop that. Restores health and magicka. It's a very strong ability. And then my number 4 here is my wild card. This will be swapped out depending on what I need. So a lot of times if I'm running trash mobs and trying to just get through the boss, I'll run Puncturing Sweep here to add DPS to AoE DPS. Sometimes I'll run Luminous Shards if the tank needs it. It needs Stam, because that definitely certainly helps restoration of Stam, and it also stuns the targets. And then sometimes I love this ability too, called Harness Magicka. It's a morph of Annulment, and Harness Magicka is another huge magic shield. So in boss fights that have a lot of magic and a lot of fire on the ground and things like that you can't avoid, you can pop that. It lasts 26 seconds, so it's a long duration that you can have that shield on you, and it absorbs quite a bit of magical damage. So if I use that in conjunction with Ward Ally, put both of those shields on me, there's not much in the game that will even move my health bar if I'm taking a lot of damage. So there's quite a number of boss fights that have a lot of magical damage. I can pop both of those and my health bar does not move whatsoever. So I'll throw that in there on some occasions when I need it. And then yeah, it's usually those 3 abilities, or 3 or 4 abilities. So yeah, that's sort of my wild card. I'll swap that out depending on what's needed at the time. So we'll swap over now to the game and we'll show you my gear. Actually, before we do that, the last ultimate that I use here is Shooting Star, and that is a morph as the ultimate in the Mages Guild tree. And I just use that when there's heavy mobs, a lot of trash mobs that I can get a bunch of damage. It puts a shooting star, or it puts an attack on one particular mob and hits all the ones that are around it. So I use that ultimate quite a bit when I'm just trying to add more damage to the trash pulls and to just move things on a little faster. Okay, so before we get into my gear, I just wanted to go over a couple of skills that I do not use, which are very common that other ones use, and I'll just sort of briefly go over why I don't use these. First is Inner Light, which is a morph of Mage Light. It gives you quite a nice little bump in your crit rating and your max magicka. I don't use this because it's 20% of my skills. I have to put it on both bars. I only have 10 skills. 2 of my skills locked up with basically 10% crit chance. It's not worth it to me because when I run the numbers, the amount of actual healing that it translates on overall basis from the start to the end of the dungeon is not that much, in my opinion. It just doesn't give me that much, so I don't particularly like it, although a lot of people do. Also, I don't run Structured Entropy. A lot of people run Structured Entropy. It's a passive that you throw on there, increases your sorcery, major sorcery buff, and gives you your spell damage by 20%. This translates for me to even less healing, and I've calculated it to the point where it's only about 6%, 5 to 6% extra healing, and honestly, to be able to maintain that passive all the time, to keep it up all the time, is just not worth an extra 6% healing. My heals are strong enough to heal the whole crowd, and don't have to necessarily worry about keeping that. So I can maintain other buffs and other utilities and not have to worry about keeping that up. Also, I don't use Equilibrium, which gives me mana back, because my mana is usually, or my magicka, sorry, is usually fine. And some of the other abilities that I don't use, yeah, I don't really use Blazing Shield all that much. It's more of a PvP thing. And I don't use Restoration Staffs things here. A lot of people say Blessing and Protection is absolutely required because of Minor Resolve and Minor Ward. I mean, I just don't think so. I don't use it. For one, it's directional, and I don't like to necessarily face my teammates. I like to face the boss when I'm fighting. So I definitely don't like the fact that I have to be directional with that. Also, I don't use Mutagen. I just don't think it's that strong of a heal. So all I use in Resto Staff is Healing Springs and Ward Ally. Gear I use is very, very simple. It's Seducer set. It's purple. I like being able to craft my own sets. I don't get wrapped up in huge gear grinds trying to get 2-piece Torx pack and 2-piece Warlock and 2-piece this, 3-piece that. I just don't get involved in that. I use a 5-piece Seducer set. My shoulders and my helm I swap out. If I use a set that I got in dungeons and vet dungeons, I might use that, but I like the boost at maximum magicka from the Magnus set. And then my stabs are not even any crafted stabs. These are just stabs I got in vet dungeons that both have the enchant that gives me magicka back. So that's the reason why I use those. And then my rings are some basic rings here. I guess I could get a healer set if I did more Dragonstar Arena, but I haven't done that much, simply for the fact that I'm not active in a guild right now. So yeah, the gear is not exciting. It's just some basic crafted gear, and I'm able to do everything in this game, all the content with this stuff here. Did want to make note that all of my enchants are magicka, max magicka, and all of my traits are infused. That even bumps up that max magicka even more. This is where I get all my maximum magickas from my gear, because my attribute points here are mostly in health, and that's because I want to try to get this number up to 20k to be able to do vet dungeons and Dragonstar Arena and trials, and you just need 20k as a minimum. I have 22 because I'm fully buffed up, but I don't ever have to worry about it. I can leave this number here at 54 and just go with it and know that my health is always going to be fine at the minimum. So this magicka is always boosted up from my gear and my enchants. The other thing to note is I just did want to go over the enchant that's on the weapons. Both of these have a deal 330 magicka damage and restore 145 magicka. So that means when I'm doing my heavy attack with my staff, I'm not only getting the magicka back from the heavy attack, but I'm also getting magicka back from my enchant on it as well. So those are really important enchants to have, because when you're trying to restore your magicka after a really tough portion of a fight, you want it to go up as quickly as possible, and having those enchants really helps. So anyway, this is how I get to these numbers here. I don't really concentrate a lot on spell damage. I know some people work on this a lot. I don't concentrate on spell crit. Again, other people do. I just don't think that it's that important because my heals are strong enough as it is without it, and I'm able to do a lot of other utility things that other people can't because they're concentrating on boosting up these numbers, which then just boosts up your maximum healing. We'll go over that later at a different time as to why I come to those conclusions, but this video, don't want to get it to be too long. My buffs that I use are pretty standard here. I use health and magicka food buff. That boosts both of those, and then my potion that I use here is just a standard old magicka potion here, and these are my two food buffs. One's does all three, and one just does two, so I swap between those two depending. And then I hardly ever have to pop a magicka potion, but when I do, it's just a basic old standard magicka potion. I haven't really worked on alchemy all that much. It's just not that exciting to me, and so I haven't really leveled it. Champion points, I'll briefly go over. Very standard stuff here. Arcanist for magicka recovery. I concentrate a lot of stuff that's needed for healing. So magicka and stam attacks do more here with tenacity, magicka recovery. I got 36 here, and the apprentice, which again is pretty standard. Blessed, I do half blessed and half elfborn to increase my spell crit, which is not that important to me, but this one here increases effectiveness of my heals that I initiate. And then the lady here is light armor focus, which boosts my armor, and I've been messing around with hardy and elemental defender as points have been coming in there. So not too exciting with the champion points. I have about 100 of them or so. Nothing too neat to write home about, but that's the basic loadout of my gear and setup and skills. And then next video, part 2, will be showing how it actually translates into vet dungeon runs and any Craglorn or quests or anything like that you might want to do.